This is Rainy Night Horrors. Outside, the storm brews, and with it comes something darker. Every drop masks a sound, every shadow holds a shape. You're not imagining it. You're hearing the truth. Listen closely. It's already here. No grand design propelled me toward that eerie expanse, merely a craving to shed the city's grating symphony, to find respite. They called it the Stone Chorus, a name that whispered of stillness. Armed with my guitar and rudimentary recording gear, I anticipated only solitude, a dialogue between myself and the ancient geology. That first twilight shattered the illusion. Sounds slithered through the air, dissonant notes unrelated to wind's sigh or any fauna I recognized. Voices, it seemed, protracted, subterranean groans that caromed off the towering rock formations. A knot tightened low in my belly. I'd haunted enough strange stages, enough derelict venues, but this auditory phantom was utterly alien. Confined to my nylon shelter, senses straining, pulse hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, I lay awake. I aimed the microphone into the darkness, hoping to capture the anomaly, but harvested only crackling, aggressive static. Phantasms flickered at the edges of sight. This, I sensed with chilling certainty, was merely the overture. My arrival had been under the candid gaze of morning. The scale of the place was staggering, immense stone monoliths erupting from the earth in dense clusters, some aspiring skyward in slender spires, others squatting in thick, formidable columns. Sunlight etched every fissure, every sharp edge, with brutal clarity. With each footfall, boots churned clouds of pale dust. I sought seclusion, a pocket hidden from hypothetical trails or fellow wanderers, eventually selecting a small clearing cradled by 3 colossal stone sentinels. The air hung motionless. Distant avian calls punctuated the quiet, but little else stirred. A fragile calm settled over me. Heat pressed in, gluing my shirt to my skin as I pitched the tent, unfurled my sleeping bag, and carefully positioned my guitar case, along with the small battery-powered recorder, in a patch of reliable shade. Then I wondered, attempting to absorb the terrain's peculiar gravity. The afternoon unfolded in profound silence. I ambled with the guitar, plucking tentative chords, testing the echo. Sound rebounded, hollow and strange, from the impassive rock faces. A shiver of the uncanny traced my spine, yet I found it compelling. Perched on a sun-warmed slab of stone, I strummed languid progressions, pausing to listen. Only my own notes, fading, answered. A brief vocal melody felt intrusive, swallowed by the vastness. The atmosphere thickened, grew heavy, almost palpable. No breeze offered relief. The sun beat down relentlessly. I resolved to conserve my voice for the cooler evening hours. I captured images of the formations, stark geometries of gray and brown that soon blurred into a monotonous grandeur. Nothing moved. The landscape held its breath. As sunset bled across the sky, an unspecific disquiet began to bloom within me. I coaxed a small fire to life on a bed of gravel, heating tinned rations. I ate leaning against a comforting bulk of stone, watching the swift transition to night. The temperature plummeted. Pulling on a jacket, I tried to court relaxation. The absence of insectile hum struck me as peculiar. Night usually throbbed with chitinous life, but here only silence reigned. Sporadic scraping noises echoed from the rocks, easily dismissed as falling scree or some natural settling. Above, the cosmos unfurled, sharp and brilliant against the velvet black. This profound isolation was the very thing I'd sought, I reminded myself. The plan remained: capture some guitar riffs tomorrow, then retreat homeward, laden with fresh ideas. Around 10, I retreated into the tent, extinguished my flashlight, and burrowed into the sleeping bag. Closing my eyes, I fought a strange intuition. The place felt poised, expectant. Sleep remained elusive. Then, a faint sound reached me, reminiscent of a far-off moan, yet it oscillated with an unnatural cadence. I sat bolt upright, chest constricting. Listening intently, the sound seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere, its source lost in the labyrinthine echoes. It persisted for perhaps half a minute, then dissolved. I held my breath, heart galloping. It returned, louder this time, morphing into a chant, long, drawn-out syllables resonating with low, guttural tones. My fingers fumbled for the recorder. Unzipping the tent flap, I peered out. Moonlight bathed the pillars in stark, spectral light. I pressed record, aiming the device toward the nearest cluster of stone giants. Then, movement, a flicker between the rocks, not solid, but shimmering, diaphanous in the lunar glow, the rigid outlines of the stone visible through its form. I strained to focus, but it melted away. My heart hammered against my ribs. Glancing at the recorder's display, I saw jagged spikes of static leaping erratically. Adjustments proved futile. The interference pulsed. The chanting continued its spectral ebb and flow. My mouth turned to dust. Gooseflesh prickled my arms. Abruptly, the voices ceased. Silence crashed back in. I scrambled inside, securing the zipper. I lay rigid, heart pounding a frantic tattoo. The urge to pack, to flee into the treacherous dark, was potent, but navigating the terrain blind felt suicidal. Dawn, I decided. I would wait for dawn. Sleep offered no refuge, only restless, shallow dives into consciousness, punctuated by murmured whispers that bled from dreams into waking. Once, jolting upright, I was convinced a silhouette stooped at my tent's entrance, but the space remained empty. I drifted until the first tentative fingers of sunlight probed the horizon. Unzipping the tent felt like surfacing for air. Relief washed over me with the daylight, though the air was bitingly cold, my breath pluming visibly. The stones stood unchanged, impassive witnesses. I checked the recorder. Its battery, freshly charged, was inexplicably half-drained. Playback yielded mostly distorted crackling. Faint, warped howling sounds lurked beneath the static, but nothing clear. I stowed the device, deciding a walk might clear my head. A faint path beckoned, winding deeper among the formations where the pillars soared even higher. Strange vertical grooves marred some surfaces, like colossal claw marks scraped down the stone. Touching one, the rock felt unnaturally cold, abrasive. My guitar remained at the campsite. I carried only my phone and a small pack with water. As I walked, the memory of the chanting echoed in my mind. Wind, I tried to rationalize, whistling through crevices, but the rhythm, the cadence, felt too deliberate, too vocal. My pulse still hadn't settled from the night's terror. I drank some water, pressing onward. No animals, no tracks, no other humans. The stone chorus felt utterly forsaken. Returning near midday, I conceived another acoustic experiment. Retrieving my guitar, I set the recorder on its small tripod. I played an ascending scale, each note climbing higher, sharper. As I reached a specific peak frequency, a visceral chill shot through me, electric, raising the hairs on my nape. My fingers fumbled on the fretboard. I stopped, scanning the silent arena. The echo seemed to linger, unnaturally prolonged. A peculiar pressure built in my ears, as if the air itself had shifted density. Nothing else. I repeated the scale. The same jolt, the same involuntary shiver. Turning off the recorder, I quickly placed it back inside the tent. Unease coiled tighter in my gut. Lunch was a hasty protein bar and water. I decided on another short hike, tracing the bases of the looming formations, fingers trailing over their cool, rough skins. A slight wind stirred, skittering loose sand across the ground. The sky remained a vast, indifferent blue. The sun beat down, drawing sweat. More photos, more monolithic shapes against blinding light. After an hour, I scaled a smaller boulder for perspective. Rows upon rows of pillars stretched into the distance. A seemingly infinite, silent congregation. The tightness returned to my chest. The stillness felt wrong, suffocating. I scrambled back down. Late afternoon found me back at camp, wrestling with indecision. Stay another night? The promise of capturing more evidence warred with primal fear. Yet, I'd committed to 2 nights. Perhaps the sounds would return. I built another fire, smaller this time, wary of attracting attention. Another tin of food consumed in the deepening twilight. The temperature plunged even faster than before. The wind subsided entirely as darkness fully claimed the sky. I sat, listening, guitar resting mute on my lap. I hesitated to play, frightened of triggering that strange resonance again. Eventually, I strummed a few low, tentative chords. Nothing. An hour passed. Exhaustion began to weigh heavy. I resolved to try sleeping again, crawling into the tent despite nerves frayed raw. I must have dozed, perhaps for 30 minutes, before the chanting resumed. It began as a low hum, almost subliminal, then swelled, gaining volume, texture. Multiple voices now, interwoven, yet utterly unintelligible. Grabbing my flashlight, I unzipped the tent flap, breath catching in my throat. The sound seemed to spiral from all directions, a vortex of voices. The recorder's lights blinked frantically. My stomach churned. Then, behind a pillar, motion. I swung the flashlight beam. A fleeting image, pale, translucent, humanoid in shape, yet the rock face behind it remained starkly visible. My throat closed. Words failed me. The figure swayed, ethereal, then dissolved behind the stone. My heart threatened to burst from my chest. I stumbled forward, flashlight beam dancing nervously across the gravel. My own footsteps sounded deafening. Tremors ran through me. Reaching the pillar, I found nothing but cold, rough stone. The chanting erupted anew, this time behind me. I spun, light slashing through the darkness. 3, perhaps 4, luminous shapes glided between the pillars. A silent ballet, arms outstretched, heads tilted back as if in ecstasy or agony. Mouths gaped, dark O's in their shimmering forms, yet no distinct faces registered. The chant pulsed, echoing, filling the space. I recoiled, stumbling over a loose rock. I fell hard, scraping my hand. The flashlight skidded away. Scrabbling desperately, breath tearing from my lungs. I retrieved it. In that instant, the chanting crescendoed, then abruptly cut out. Silence slammed back. When the beam steadied, the figures were gone. I remained on the gravel, hand stinging, a thin trickle of blood welling from the abrasion. Dizziness washed over me. The silence felt immense, terrifying. Grabbing the flashlight, I hauled myself upright and lurched back to the tent, fumbling with the zipper, hand shaking uncontrollably. I checked my phone. No signal. Thoughts raced, chaotic, frantic. Nothing in my experience had prepared me for this. Though utterly spent, sleep was impossible. I sat huddled against the tent wall, staring fixedly at the zipped entrance. Hours crawled by. Faint whispers seemed to drift, on the edge of hearing, intermittent, elusive. My eyelids grew leaden. I slipped in and out of a state somewhere between wakefulness and nightmare until the gray light of dawn seeped through the fabric. With the sun's arrival came stark clarity. I had to leave. Now. I packed with frantic haste, fingers clumsy with cold and residual fear. Guitar slammed into its case, supplies stuffed into the backpack. Tent collapsed haphazardly. Food was forgotten. Escape was the only imperative. The trek back felt agonizingly slow. My feet dragged, legs trembled with fatigue. The air remained unnervingly still. Navigating the winding paths between the silent sentinels, I cast constant, fearful glances over my shoulder, half expecting to see those shimmering forms trailing me. Nothing. Only the crunch of my boots on the path and the ragged sound of my own breathing broke the silence. Reaching my car around midday felt like breaching the surface after drowning. My chest remained tight, constricted. I threw my gear into the trunk, slammed it shut, locked myself inside the driver's seat. The engine turning over was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. Hands trembled on the wheel. One last look at the stone giants dominating the horizon. Then I drove, eyes fixed forward, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, needing only distance. Back in the assumed safety of my apartment that night, I confronted the recordings, mostly static, thick and hostile. Buried within were fragments of those humming voices, distorted beyond recognition. On the brief video clips, strange flickers, pale, ephemeral outlines drifting across the frame. The audio clipped, buzzed erratically. My laptop stuttered, froze twice. Attempts to clean the files proved futile, only deepening the sense of profound unease. I shut the machine down. A chill permeated my hands. My stomach roiled. The memory of those shapes, their silent, swaying dance, burned behind my eyes. In the days that followed, I tried to reconnect with my music, my guitar, but whenever my fingers strayed towards the higher registers, struck a certain piercing note, the chill returned, a jolt, like static discharge running through my veins. The muscles in my neck would seize. Images of flickering translucence flooded my mind. It felt like something stood just beyond my vision, a presence felt but unseen. My breath would hitch. Often, I'd stop mid-phrase, whirling around, expecting. What? Nothing was ever there, yet the feeling persisted, unshakable. My thoughts kept circling back to that desolate place, those voices echoing in the lithic dark. Sometimes, I wake abruptly in the dead of night, convinced the chanting has followed me home. I'll stumble out of bed, heart pounding, only to find the familiar quiet of my apartment. Lying awake afterwards, straining to calm the frantic pulse, is becoming routine. I recounted a sanitized version to a friend. Weird sounds, got spooked, left out the spectral dances. He chuckled, suggesting wind, maybe pranksters. I didn't argue. I knew what I had witnessed. Life attempts to resume its course, but it's irrevocably altered. My music has shifted, become hesitant. I subconsciously avoid those high, resonant notes. My hands sometimes tremble when I try. Recordings sound subtly wrong. The habit of checking over my shoulder is ingrained now. A constant low-level hum of anxiety. The tension never fully dissipates. What resides in the stone chorus, I cannot say. I know only that it is sentient in some way, reactive to sound, particularly certain frequencies. I felt its response physically, like touching a live wire. I saw those ephemeral figures moving with an unsettling grace that wasn't human. Late at night sometimes, I still think I hear them calling, a low, resonant chant that sends ice water through my blood. Is it memory? Or did a sliver of that place, that resonance, follow me back? I cannot forget. My music is scarred, my nights troubled. Something lingers, watchful, waiting in the periphery of my mind. I harbor no intention of ever returning. I sought inspiration and stumbled upon something else, something ancient and aware. I remain uncertain if it truly let me go, or if a part of it remains tethered, humming just beyond hearing, poised to harmonize the next time my fingers find that specific chilling note. That is the extent of my knowledge. My quest for silence in desolate places is over. I'll take the city's familiar cacophony. Thank you very much. Let the rocks keep their chorus. The skeletal sign groaned under the wind's assault, its paint-flaked script barely whispering. Terminal fuel, 100 barren miles. As my sedan crunched onto the fractured asphalt of the service station, a tremor traced my spine, colder than the encroaching night. An undeniable wrongness saturated the air, yet the needle quivering near E left no alternative. This mundane necessity I could never have foreseen was the threshold to a crucible that would scorch my very will to survive. My name is Leo, documentarian of the overlooked, a freelance lensman. I was tracing tarmac veins back from an assignment deep in the country's forgotten folds, seduced by the promise of the scenic, desolate route. It was the sort of asphalt ribbon where solitude stretches into hours, where the world shrinks to just your engine and the endless sky. Stepping from the car, the quiet struck like a physical blow, a profound vacuum devoid of crickets, the whisper of distant engines, even the expected thrum of the ancient pumps. Only this unnerving, absolute hush, raising the fine hairs along my neck. The station itself seemed fossilized, circa 1970. A lone pump stood like a rusted monument on the cracked concrete expanse. Bars webbed the windows of the attached convenience store, a cramped box squatting under the gloom. Yet, light bled from within, and silhouettes shifted. Small comfort. I began feeding fuel into my thirsty tank, my gaze tethered to the store's grimy panes. 3 figures moved inside, their gestures sharp, edged with argument. One man's head snapped up, his eyes locking onto mine through the glass. The raw malice in that look sent my own gaze skittering away. The tank clicked full. Hesitation anchored my feet. The imperative was to enter, to settle the debt, but a primal scream in my gut urged retreat, immediate flight, a ragged breath. Paranoia, I chided myself. Late night, exhaustion, imagination running riot. The bell above the door clattered abrasively as I pushed inside. Instantly, the talk ceased. 3 sets of eyes pivoted, fixing on me. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Evening, I managed, striving for nonchalance. Just paying for pump 1. The man stationed behind the counter offered a slow, deliberate nod, his clouded eyes never leaving my face as he keyed in the amount. As I extended the cash, I registered the dark smears coating his hands. Grease, my mind supplied. Mechanic's hands. But a colder whisper insinuated it resembled nothing so much as dried blood. Got a long way to go? Another man inquired. He was built like a piling, a jagged scar bisecting one cheek. No, heading home, I replied, the urge to escape tightening my chest. Maybe an hour yet. He nodded, a silent communication passing between him and his companions that iced my veins. Drive careful. Roads are full of crazies this time of night. A mumbled thanks, and I practically bolted back to my car. Pulling away, I glimpsed them in the window, watching. A violent shudder racked me as I stomped the accelerator, desperate to put miles between myself and that malignant outpost. 5 minutes melted into the darkness before twin lights bloomed in my rearview mirror. Initially unremarkable, but as the minutes stretched, the vehicle behind maintained a perfect, unnerving synchronicity, neither closing the gap nor falling back. Sweat slicked my palms on the steering wheel. Nothing, I insisted. Someone else traveling this lonely stretch. But the insistent inner voice, the one that noted the attendant's stained hands, wasn't convinced. Time for a test. I eased off the gas. The headlights behind me dimmed slightly, matching my deceleration. I pressed down, accelerating. They surged in perfect mimicry. My heart hammered against my ribs. No coincidence. Squinting into the mirror yielded little. Just the hulking silhouette of a dark vehicle. Quite possibly the pickup truck I'd peripherally noted parked beside the station. The realization sent a frigid wave through my bloodstream. For 10 agonizing minutes, I threw every evasive maneuver I knew into the void. Fluctuating speeds, abrupt turns onto unmarked side roads, even the fleeting, suicidal thought of stopping, confronting them. But each time hope flickered, those twin beams would reappear, relentless predators in the glass. Panic began its insidious crawl up my throat. My hands trembled. Perspiration traced cold paths down my back. Help was a fantasy out here. My phone displayed only no service, and the road remained utterly deserted save for us. Suddenly, their engine roared. The dark shape surged forward, drawing level. A sideways glance confirmed it. The pickup from the station. The driver was lost in shadow, but the passenger's profile, stark against the faint interior light, bore the unmistakable topography of the scarred man. The truck began to drift closer, nudging, trying to force me from the pavement. I wrenched the wheel, the tires screaming in protest, narrowly avoiding the still kiss of their bumper. My heart felt dangerously close to bursting. What was their endgame? Why me? Desperation slammed my foot to the floor. My aging sedan groaned, the engine shrieking as I pushed it far beyond its comfort zone. The needle swept past 90, kissed 100. The landscape dissolved into streaks of indistinct color, the yellow center line a solid, hypnotic bar. The pickup momentarily lagged, then its engine bellowed anew, closing the distance. They weren't giving up. Ahead, a dark slash indicated a turnoff. Instinct, not thought, governed my hands. I yanked the steering wheel, sending the car fishtailing onto an unpaved track. The pickup shot past the junction, the overshoot granting me precious seconds. The dirt road was a brutal bucking ride. The car shuddered violently over ruts and rocks. Branches lashed the windshield like angry claws. Control felt tenuous, a slippery thing threatening to escape my grasp. Fear was a physical weight on the accelerator. Behind me, the relentless growl of the pickup's engine drew nearer. Panic threatened to drown me, but I fought it back, forcing focus. There had to be an escape. Just as hope began to fray completely, pinpricks of light materialized in the distance. Closer, they resolved into the comforting geometry of a small town. Houses, streetlights, the blessed implication of other people. Life. I'd never known such profound relief. My car burst onto the main street, tires squealing on pavement. The few late-night stragglers froze, staring as I careened through their quiet world. A final check in the mirror. The pickup emerged from the dirt road's mouth, hesitated, then slowly reversed, melting back into the darkness it had spawned from. I didn't cease driving until the reassuring blue glow of the local police station filled my windshield. My hands shook so violently, I fumbled putting the car into park. I stumbled inside, surely presenting a picture of lunacy, and stammered my fractured narrative to the nonplussed officer behind the desk. To their credit, they listened intently. A statement was taken, patrols dispatched to investigate the gas station and search for the pickup. They found nothing. The station, when they arrived, was deserted, cloaked in dust and neglect, appearing unused for years. The ensuing weeks were a blur of hypervigilance. Every shadow seemed to hold menace. Every approaching headlight spurred a jolt of adrenaline. I rerouted my commutes, traded in my car, even contemplated relocating entirely. But time, unmarked by further incident, gradually smoothed the raw edges of fear. To this day, the motive behind that terrifying pursuit remains an enigma, a cruel game, intent to rob, or something far darker. The questions hang unanswered, but the certainty remains. Lonely highways at night are landscapes I no longer traverse, and my fuel tank never dips below half before embarking on any journey. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before sleep, the phantom roar of that pursuing engine echoes in my mind, a stark reminder that peril often lurks in the mundane, that the line between sanctuary and terror can be as thin as a wrong turn onto a darkened road. The experience forged changes in me, a heightened caution, an ingrained awareness, but I refuse to grant fear dominion. Instead, that residual energy fuels my photography, my quest to capture the world's intricate beauty, even within its most desolate canvases. Because life, I learned with visceral clarity, is fragile and fierce. Every moment, even those steeped in terror, contributes to the mosaic of self. And occasionally, late at night, editing images, a shot of a solitary gas station, or an empty ribbon of highway will surface. For a heartbeat, I'm back there, pulse frantic, palms slick. Then, a conscious breath, a reminder, I'm safe, and I continue my work. Because ultimately, that is all we can truly do. Keep moving forward, irrespective of the terrors receding in the rearview mirror. The invitation arrived like a key to a hidden lock, a weekend escape, brokered by colleagues turned confidants. They spoke of a cabin nestled deep within sylvan folds, leagues from the nearest sputtering townlight, a place to shed the city's skin, breathe pine-sharp air, perhaps trace forgotten trails. Anticipation hummed within me. Stepping onto the property was like crossing an unseen threshold. Silence, thick and profound, descended immediately. Here, isolation wasn't merely distance. It was an entity, amplifying every rustle, every sigh of wind through the ancient trees. It felt less like a retreat, more like stepping onto a different plane of existence. We were a quartet bound by the casual intimacy of shared workspaces. Myself, Silas, Reese, and Alara. The usual pleasantries felt blessedly redundant. We slipped easily into comfortable quietude. That first day unfolded in a haze of sun-dappled leisure, grilling, the clink of bottles, meandering conversations beneath a vast, indifferent sky. As twilight bled into true dark, a pleasant weariness settled over us, contentment warming us like the crackling fire pit. It was Silas, naturally, who pricked the bubble of peace as embers pulsed before us. A sly grin stretched across his face. "You realize," he began, his voice conspiratorial, "this place sat empty for decades, just abandoned. The story goes, the owner walked out one morning and simply evaporated. We offered obligatory eye rolls, indulgent smiles. Silas thrived on weaving unsettling narratives. Yet, tonight, his usual theatricality was muted, replaced by an unnerving gravity. "No, seriously," he pressed, his tone dropping to a near whisper that barely carried over the fire's hiss. "Locals whisper about it, claim it's occupied. They hear things in the deep night, unexplained sounds. People have gone missing out here." Reese snorted, a sharp sound in the quiet. "Give it a rest, Silas." But Alara drew her wrap tighter, her gaze darting towards the impenetrable wall of trees surrounding us. "Maybe let's not dwell on the macabre," she murmured, her voice thin. "Not when we're quite literally in the middle of nowhere." We steered the conversation towards safer shores, yet Alara's unease lingered, a subtle dissonance in the night's harmony. I didn't credit Silas's tale, not truly, but the woods possessed a nocturnal sentience, a palpable weight that suggested unseen watchers. Eventually, the fire dwindled, and exhaustion claimed us. The cabin offered 2 sleeping chambers. Reese and I took one, Silas and Alara the other. Sleep claimed me swiftly, a welcome oblivion after the day's languor. Yet sometime in the hollow hours, I surfaced. Pitch darkness pressed against my eyelids. Only Reese's gentle, rhythmic breathing disturbed the absolute stillness. I lay adrift, consciousness slowly reasserting itself. Then, a sound, delicate yet distinct. Tap, tap, tap. It emanated from the window pane beside my bed. My breath caught. My pulse quickened. The sound was faint, precise, like the drumming of fingernails on glass. A glance confirmed Reese remained lost to dreams. A branch, I reasoned desperately, wind tossed against the pane, but the rhythm was too steady, too deliberate. Tap, 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 slow, measured, as if the tapper knew we lay within, listening. I remained utterly still, pinned by a nameless dread. Minutes stretched taut, then the tapping ceased. A shaky sigh escaped me. Imagination, I told myself firmly. Just the woods playing tricks. But as I tried to coax sleep back, the unnerving certainty that we were observed clung like frost. Morning light did little to dispel the unease. Over lukewarm coffee, I recounted the nocturnal disturbance. Silas, predictably, seized upon it. See? His grin was wide, triumphant. Told you this place had teeth. Alara, however, went pale, her mug trembling slightly. You're joking, right, Leo? She asked, searching my face. I attempted nonchalance, shrugging. Probably nothing. Wind, a loose branch. Her unconvinced eyes stayed on me. For the remainder of the day, Alara remained tethered to the cabin's immediate vicinity, refusing excursions that led too far under the dense canopy. A pang of guilt struck me for voicing my experience, yet a deeper current of wrongness flowed beneath the day's forced normalcy. That evening, an unspoken tension hurried us towards bedtime. We retreated earlier, the silences between us heavier than before. Lying in the oppressive dark, I strained my ears, half expecting, half dreading the return of the sound. Around midnight, it began. Tap, tap, tap. My eyes snapped open, frozen again, heart hammering against my ribs. Identical to the previous night, soft, intentional, originating just outside the glass. Reese slept on, a world away. Logic warred with rising panic. Then another layer. Whispering. A mere phantom of sound. A susurrus. So faint, it might have been the blood in my own ears. It felt like hushed, urgent murmurs. The words indistinguishable, slithering just beneath the threshold of hearing. The sound coiled ice around my spine. The urge to wake Reese, to share the burden of this auditory horror, was immense, but fear paralyzed me. I lay rigid, trapped between the relentless tapping and the insidious whispers, every nerve alight. It seemed an eternity before the sounds finally dissolved back into the suffocating silence. Sleep, when it eventually came, was shallow and troubled, offering no escape. The next breakfast was strained. I relayed the night's events, the tapping, the whispering. Alara looked genuinely terrified, her face bleached, her hands unsteady. This has gone too far, she said, her voice quivering. If this is some elaborate prank, Silas, it's cruel. Silas shook his head, his usual mischievous spark replaced by wide-eyed concern. I swear, Alara, it's not me, he insisted, casting nervous glances towards the windows. I didn't hear a thing. The day passed under a pall of anxiety. Every creak of the floorboards, every bird call, seemed amplified, potentially sinister. Even Silas, the purveyor of ghost stories, moved with a new, cautious tension. We clung to the cabin's perimeter, the vast woods now feeling less like a sanctuary and more like a cage with unseen bars. Nightfall was met with collective dread. None of us wanted to retire. We lingered in the main room, lights blazing defiantly against the encroaching dark, conversation sputtering in low tones. But the inevitable could only be postponed. With tense good nights, we retreated to our rooms, bracing for the darkness. I lay taut, listening, every muscle coiled, and then, as if summoned, the tapping commenced. Tap, tap, tap. It was louder now, sharper, imbued with an unnerving impatience. I bolted upright, breath catching in my throat, fear of physical presence in the room. Across the narrow space, Reese was awake, his eyes wide in the gloom, fixed on mine. He had heard it. "God, what is that?" he breathed, his voice rough with fear. I could only shake my head, mute. The tapping persisted, a dreadful, rhythmic assault on the silence. Then the whispering returned, no longer faint, but distinct, clearer, a rasping susurration just beyond the glass. Though the words remained elusive, the cadence felt horribly intimate, as if calling our names, beckoning us. A visceral coldness shot through me. We had to get out. My hand found Reese's arm, pulling him urgently towards the door. We stumbled into the hallway, bursting into Silas and Alara's room. They were both awake, huddled together, faces stark white with fear. "We're leaving," I managed, the words barely audible. "Right now." There was no argument. We fumbled for belongings, shrugged into coats over sleepwear, and fled the cabin, plunging into the consuming night without a backward glance. The darkness outside was absolute, the towering trees like skeletal giants leaning in, but escape was the only imperative. As the car clawed its way down the dirt track, the phantom sounds of tapping and whispering seemed to pursue us, eventually swallowed by the engine's roar and the growing distance. Silence reigned in the car, thick with unspoken terror. The cabin, and whatever resided there, remained behind us, a pocket of dread we would never revisit. "3 weeks it's been since this patch of earth became mine. Flat land, mostly, cradling a clapboard house backed by a stand of whispering pines, an unassuming orchard clinging to its flank, antiquated wiring, a cellar whose ceiling stooped low. These were the overt flaws I tallied. Disquiet isn't my usual companion. Solitude suits me. Yet, from the first turn of the key, a subtle dissonance hummed beneath the quiet. What follows isn't invention, no strained theatrics, just the unvarnished sequence of days, precisely as they unfolded for me. Keys in hand, my truck coughed to silence beside the porch stairs. A few cartons thumped onto the worn floorboards. The house came pre-filled, a legacy of cast-off furnishings from the prior occupant. "Downsizing," he'd murmured, unwilling to wrestle with tables and chairs. I traced a path through the rooms, flipping switches, testing the sash windows. An unremarkable shell, layered with the fine dust of vacancy. Nothing then felt amiss. But the cellar door yielded a different air, thick, stagnant, smelling profoundly of damp soil and time left undisturbed. Wooden treads groaned beneath my boots. My height, a shade over 6 feet, proved incompatible with the low-slung joists. I stooped instinctively, navigating the constricted space. A solitary bulb radiated a frail, anemic light onto earthen floors and rough-hewn walls. My gaze snagged on skeletal wooden racks, identified by the seller as cradles for his homemade vintages. A constellation of empty glass lay scattered nearby. The closeness pressed in. The air felt heavy, used. I retreated quickly, seeking the clean breath of the outside. Days blurred into a rhythm of assimilation. Wardrobes received clothes, Cupboards swallowed provisions. Tools found their designated corner. Mornings meant town runs for necessities. Afternoons were surrendered to the house's small demands, mending roof shingles, clearing choked gutters. A week dissolved into this comfortable cadence. Mundanity reigned until the second weekend arrived. The cellar beckoned with its disarray, a tangle of derelict cans, glass shards, and oxidized implements clinging to the racks. Midday found me descending into its gloom. The weak bulb switched on. I knelt, methodically crating empty bottles, and then the first tremor of wrongness. A sound, soft yet distinct, the measured release of breath just over my shoulder. Faint, undeniably there. My own respiration was even, unstrained by the simple task. This was other. A slow, deliberate sigh, not my own. I froze, head swiveling. Empty space met my eyes, yet the fine hairs on my nape prickled, a knot cinched low in my gut. Old timbers settling, a draft snaking through some unseen fissure. Logical possibilities warred with the visceral chill. I resumed my work, but the rhythm was broken, punctuated by constant furtive glances into the shadows behind me. The sound did not repeat itself. Sleep offered its usual oblivion, though dawn found me awake sooner than custom. The house held its breath. Coffee mug warming my hand, I toured the rooms. Order prevailed. Old houses breathe strange sighs, I reasoned. Settling bones, drafts, perfectly normal phenomena in tired structures. A brittle laugh escaped me, aimed at my own unease. Nevertheless, the cellar lost its appeal for casual visits. A few days hence, motivated by a practical concern for foundation leaks in the perpetually damp space, I ventured down again. Flashlight beam probing the concrete walls, my eye caught them. 3 stark, vertical gouges marring the whitewash, spaced like talons, roughly at the height of my shoulder. Not accidental scrapes. These were deliberate furrows, scored deep by something sharp. My fingertip traced the indentation, a physical confirmation that sent a ripple of cold through me. I stood motionless, mind scrambling for benign explanations. Moving furniture? A carelessly wielded tool, yet the repetition implied intent. A quick survey revealed no other such marks. I ascended, pushing the image away, but it lingered, an unwelcome burr in my thoughts. Night fractured around 3 a.m. My bedroom sits diagonally opposite the main living space. Floors solid hardwood. Wood groans with temperature shifts. A familiar language. This sound, however, spoke differently. A methodical, weighted tread. Thud, 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 originating directly beneath my floorboards. The cellar sprawls under most of the house. Footsteps there could easily resonate upward. Bolt upright, breath held captive in my chest. Too heavy for vermin, too deliberate. For perhaps 30 seconds, the slow pacing continued. Then, silence descended. My pulse hammered against my ribs. Palms grew slick. Trousers pulled on, flashlight clutched. I moved into the darkened artery of the hallway. Kitchen lights flared, revealing mundane surfaces, undisturbed. I reached the cellar door. Closed. Locked, always, with a sturdy padlock. Except now, the brass clasp hung open on the hasp, unlatched. A cold stasis gripped me. Locking it the previous evening was an ingrained habit, a certainty. I lifted the padlock, smooth, unscratched, utterly devoid of any sign of force. Simply, open. Flashlight beam cutting the darkness, I eased the door inward. The bulb below remained unlit. Blackness yawned. From the top step, my light swept the void. Stillness. A tremor started in my hands. "Anyone there?" The question emerged, thin, reedy. Silence answered. Flipping the switch bathed the central space in that weak, familiar glow. Nothing visibly disturbed. A few tentative steps down, corners scanned. Empty. The absurdity of my posture, t-shirt clad, flashlight wielding, struck me. Retreating, I refastened the padlock, tugging twice to confirm. The urge to plumb the depths further was entirely absent. Sleep, when I returned to bed, was a shallow, broken thing, punctuated by straining ears and a tension that lingered until the first gray light of dawn. Daylight brought resolve. A trip to town secured a formidable new padlock, recommended by the hardware proprietor as impervious to cutters, alongside a heavier hasp. Explanations felt unnecessary. I simply paid and departed. By afternoon, the reinforced security was in place. Yanking the door confirmed its solidity. No give. A measure of calm returned. I resolved to banish the unease, immerse myself in routine. For 2 days, tranquility held. Then, one evening, post-dinner, television flickering in the living room. Around 9, a distinct bump resonated from the kitchen's vicinity, like a single, muted fist striking hollow wood. I muted the program, moved toward the sound. It emanated from the cellar door. The new lock gleamed, firmly engaged. Standing sentinel, I listened. My heart rate remained even, yet a cold tide of apprehension washed over me. Another dull thump, followed by profound quiet. Ear pressed to the wood, I strained for any further noise. Nothing. Pipes groaning, timbers contracting. Rationalizations felt thin. After a long moment, I returned to the flickering screen, nudging the volume higher, attempting to drown the insistent worm of dread coiling inside. Later, sleep beckoned. A final check confirmed the cellar door remained secured. An unfamiliar impulse led me to lock my own bedroom door, an added layer against what? Slumber claimed me, only to be shattered around 2 a.m. Silence reigned, save the refrigerator's low drone. I lay rigid, listening for the phantom tread. Nothing stirred. 10 minutes crawled by before sleep tentatively returned. Morning arrived bright, birdsong filtering through the glass. The familiar relief of daylight washed over me during coffee, yet doubt gnawed. The cellar door padlock held fast, but certainty demanded inspection. Key turned, lock yielded, door swung inward. My descent echoed in the subterranean quiet. At the bottom, I surveyed the familiar scene, racks unmoved, bottles undisturbed. Then, my gaze fixed on the wall opposing the claw-like scratches. A new blemish, a faint gray smear against the whitewash. Indisputably, a handprint, blurred as if pressed by dusty fingers. Closer inspection revealed its dimensions, roughly mirroring my own palm, perhaps slightly more slender. The texture was powdery, like ash or fine soil, the wall beneath utterly dry. A visceral lurch in my gut. Weeks, at least, since I'd examined this particular wall section. A thorough sweep of the cellar, behind crates, inside derelict cupboards, yielded nothing. No footprints marred the packed earth near the foundation. Had I simply overlooked it before? Or was it fresh? The uncertainty was intolerable. I wouldn't abide its presence. Fetching a damp cloth from upstairs, I scrubbed the wall until the gray impression vanished. The scratches opposite remained unchanged. Locking the door behind me, I retreated to the kitchen. A second coffee, doing little to quell the tremor in my hands. Isolation felt suddenly acute. Few local contacts, and the reluctance to appear irrational stayed my hand from seeking help. A lull descended. Days unfolded with surface normality. Mowing, pruning, the fresh scent of paint in an upstairs room. Yet, beneath the veneer of routine, vigilance persisted. Nightfall often found me, silencing the television, closing the laptop, straining into the quiet, for sounds half expected, half dreaded. Sometimes, only the house's natural size answered. Other times, an indistinct creak or thump defied easy explanation. Just over a week passed, I resolved to purge the cellar entirely. No more lingering debris, no potential nests for unseen things. Armed with a shop vacuum, heavy refuse sacks, and a portable work lamp, I descended around mid-morning. Cobwebs surrendered to the vacuum's roar. Years of accumulated grime yielded to the broom. 2 sacks filled swiftly with detritus, shattered glass, moldering rags, wood scraps. Throughout the labor, an unnerving pressure built between my shoulder blades. The distinct, tactile sensation of being observed, of someone standing inches behind me, their breath stirring the air. Compulsively, I glanced back again and again, meeting only empty, dimly lit space. My shoulders tightened. A prickling unease crawled across my scalp. My pulse, though steady, carried the heightened thrum of perceived scrutiny. At one point, I cut the vacuum's engine, listening intently. Only the echo of my own breathing filled the void. "Anyone here?" The whispered question hung unanswered in the heavy air. Logic insisted. No hiding place existed in this cramped pit. Calm, I told myself. Maintain calm. I completed the task. Hauled the refuse sacks upstairs. Secured the door. Double-checked the lock. The rest of the day passed under a shadow of disquiet. Sleep took hold near 11 that night. 4 a.m. jolted me awake. The footsteps returned, unmistakable. Louder this time, sharper, each tread slow and purposeful. Then, a soft impact, as if something brushed against the cellar door from within. My heart seized, pounding against my ribs. The bedside lamp flared. I strained my ears. A low groan followed. The unmistakable protest of hinges turning. The cellar door was opening. Soundlessly as possible, I slid from bed, pulse thundering, hand closing around the reassuring weight of a baseball bat from the closet, mouth parchment dry, palm slick with sweat. I eased my bedroom door open a fraction, peering into the hall's gloom, pierced only by the kitchen's faint nightlight. A minute stretched taut with anticipation. No figure emerged. I drifted down the hallway, a shadow myself. Reaching the kitchen, I saw it. The cellar door hung slightly ajar. On the floor beneath lay the heavy-duty padlock, gaping open, pristine. A band tightened around my chest. I felt the frantic pulse drumming in my throat. Edging forward, I nudged the door wider. Darkness pooled below. My fingers found the switch. The cellar bulb flickered to life, illuminating emptiness. No sound, no movement. The descent held no appeal. I pulled the door shut, slid the violated padlock back onto the hasp, clicked it closed. I remained there a moment, breath ragged. Morning saw me purchase yet another padlock, a third iteration of futile security, and that is where things stand. Sporadic sounds persist. The sensation of being watched adheres to me whenever I cross the cellar threshold. Explanations remain elusive. No broken hasps, no forced entry, only locks lying open on the floor, untouched by tools. Something resides below, something that chafes at confinement. Proof is impossible, but the feeling is undeniable, visceral. I continue the motions of residency, tending the land, maintaining the house, yet the charade wears thin. This is not imagination. The scratches, the ephemeral handprint, the inexplicably opened locks, these are tangible anchors to the reality of the footsteps that stalk the hours before dawn. No lore of death haunts this place, no tales of tragedy that I know. Still, the disquiet deepens. The conviction that I'm not the sole occupant of this house has taken root. That is the unvarnished truth. Every night, I secure the cellar door. Every morning, I half expect to find it gaping. Every creak from below sounds like pacing, a restless circuit, waiting for me to descend once more. And I find myself profoundly unready to answer that silent summons. This acreage became mine only last month, acquired with little fanfare, following the discovery of a weathered for sale plank beside the unpaved track. The dwelling itself is unassuming, clad in a pallid paint, now flaking like sunburnt skin. At the property's far reach stands the barn, canted slightly askew, yet appearing sound enough for rudimentary storage. Vestiges of the former occupant lingered, rusted implements, fractured crates, and a multitude of dust-laden corners awaiting my attention. My ambition extended merely to quiet evenings, perhaps, watching twilight bleed behind the rolling hills. A vast cornfield, unfurling beyond the barn, truly captured my interest, a potential source of modest revenue. Yet, something arrested my gaze during that initial trek through its whispering corridors. There, planted squarely in the field's heart, stood a scarecrow. Its attire, though tattered, possessed an unnerving precision in its arrangement. The jacket collar maintained a crisp line against the straw neck. The trousers refused to sag. The hat perched with intention, not happenstance. It suggested tending, recent adjustments. Initially, I dismissed it as mere agricultural detritus, a relic from some long-departed steward of this land. I ambled past it on that first exploratory day. It seemed angled forward, its burlap countenance directed vaguely toward the farmhouse. A peculiar tremor resonated deep in my gut. Inexplicable then. Just a construct of straw and timber, wasn't it? Its face, faded sacking, displayed stray filaments of stuffing poking through. For eyes, black buttons served, though one bore a jagged chip, rendering it imperfect. A mouth, stitched crudely into a twisted line. My glance lingered but a moment before I moved on. It remained inert, motionless, a silent sentinel. Several nights hence, ensconced within the living room, I sought repose. Windows yawned open to the lingering warmth of summer air. The wind, a familiar voice in the cornfield, began its nightly discourse, usually a sibilant, calming rustle. Tonight, it held a different cadence, a rhythm almost bordering on conspiratorial whispers. No distinct words reached me, only that faint, persistent susurrus that prickled the hairs along my arms. Drawn to the back porch, I peered across the expanse. Moonlight, thin and spectral, silvered the swaying tassels of corn, and there, amidst them, the silhouette held its ground, the scarecrow's form, stark against the pale stalks. Squinting, I entertained a fleeting, chilling notion. It had turned, not merely leaned. but pivoted fully towards me. Darkness and distance rendered certainty impossible. I fought the unease, attributing the quickening pulse, the shallow breaths, to fatigue. Retreating inside, I secured the door, murmuring reassurances. Bits of cloth, strands of straw, bound to a wooden stake. Sleep eventually claimed me on the couch. Dawn broke, and before venturing into town for provisions, I resolved to inspect the field. The crunch of earth beneath my boots punctuated the morning quiet as I navigated the rows. Upon reaching the center, the scarecrow greeted me, yet subtly altered. Its hat now canted sharply to one side, aiming, it seemed, directly at my approach. The arms appeared drawn closer to its torso, a minute shift in posture. A film of sweat beaded on my brow despite the cool morning air. Hesitantly, I extended a hand, brushing the dusty fabric of its jacket. The sleeve stitching felt frail. I examined the post, the bindings. All seemed secure, superficially normal. Then I saw them, impressions in the soft earth encircling its base. Not mine. Smaller, scuffed disturbances, as if left by dragging feet. They traced a path away from the sentinel, vanishing into the dense weave of cornstalks. A lurch of disquiet seized my stomach. The wind, perhaps. Mischievous local youths. Yet no children had I seen, nor heard any trespassers upon my land. The town yielded basic groceries and brief exchanges with a few locals. The property, they confirmed, lay dormant for 2 decades at least. No one spoke of a scarecrow. No one mentioned peculiar footprints. I volunteered nothing, wary of cultivating a reputation for paranoia in my first week. Evening found me again on the porch, observing the cornfield's transformation under the setting sun. Clouds ignited in hues of orange and rose. Insects hummed their vespers in the grass. The dry, papery scent of corn husks drifted lazily. A compulsion rose within me to walk out there, to confront the figure, but I quelled it, resolving to wait for daylight. The memory of those footprints lingered, a cold weight, making nocturnal excursions into the field unpalatable. Around 10, I secured the house and retired, leaving a window slightly ajar for ventilation, hoping for an undisturbed night. But near midnight, I awoke. A rustling, distant, yet more insistent than before, disturbed the quiet. Rising, I peered through the window. The moon, now bolder, cast a luminous wash across the yard. My view into the corn was limited, but then I heard it, a soft thud, the impact of something heavy meeting earth. My pulse hammered. Flashlight in hand, boots hastily pulled on, I stepped onto the porch. The night air felt dense, charged. My legs were rigid, my breathing ragged. The flashlight beam sliced into the field's edge. The initial rows stirred, their movement unnaturally vigorous, as if parted by an unseen passage. "Hello?" I called out, my voice thin, unsteady. "Is anyone there?" Silence answered, save for the wind's sudden escalation, whipping the corn into a frenzy. Indecision held me captive. Then, a flicker of rapid motion near the field's core, something swiveling, spinning. The scarecrow's shape seemed to lurch sideways. A constriction seized my chest. Straining to hear above the wind, I caught a faint murmur, unintelligible, fleeting. The hand gripping the flashlight began to tremble. Abruptly, all fell silent, but the frantic rhythm of my own respiration. I retreated, bolted the door, and slumped onto a kitchen chair, eyes fixed on the barrier. Dawn found me still awake. With the first tentative rays, I rose, compelled toward the field. My limbs protested, stiff from sleeplessness. My eyes burned. The air held that distinct early morning coolness, dew jeweling the corn leaves. I marched to the Scarecrow station. It seemed taller, or perhaps it was merely the angle of the nascent light. The hat, undeniably, was oriented towards me. Its arms dangled awkwardly, pulled downward, straw extruded from fissures in its sides, the fabric seemingly breached. The ground beneath bore fresh, shallow disturbances. Crouching, I touched one mark, a drag sign, its origin obscure. A thorough search yielded nothing further. My heart felt leaden. My gaze kept returning to the Scarecrow's face, the stitches defining its mouth, appearing looser, stretched, as if parted in a nascent gasp. Shaking my head, I turned back to the house. The day became a blur of deliberate labor, clearing the barn, stacking hay, organizing forgotten tools. Hours I worked, pausing only for a meager lunch, the physical exertion a welcome anesthetic for my frayed nerves. But as late afternoon shadows lengthened, the inevitability of nightfall and its attendant anxieties returned. My stomach coiled. The memory of the quivering flashlight beam resurfaced. I resolved to check the field once more before sunset, seeking the solace of normalcy. Walking with determined strides, feigning composure, I entered the corn, sunlight filtering through the towering stalks. Reaching the center, I stopped dead. The Scarecrow leaned precariously forward, nearly detached from its post, as if arrested mid-descent. Its arms stretched forth. Fabric around the shoulders hung in tatters. The rope binding it remained, yet hung slack. Fresh straw littered the ground beneath. My throat constricted. Circling warily, maintaining distance, I observed its back. Long scratches, deliberate cuts, marred the fabric. Not mere decay, but violation. Straw bristled from these wounds at unnatural angles. The thrumming of my own pulse filled my ears. Sweat traced cold paths down my spine. The urge to dismantle it, tear it down, roared with a primal caution. Would that invite worse? The notion of a vagrant, skulking nocturnally, tampering with the effigy, offered a sliver of rational explanation. It had to be human mischief. Marching back to the barn, I procured stout rope. Returning, I lashed the figure securely to the post, binding torso and arms, cinching the knots until the wood groaned under the strain. Stepping back, a fragile sense of control settled over me. I managed a laugh, thin and hollow in the stillness. Night descended again. The porch light cast a defiant yellow circle. Beside the back door, I placed the heavy flashlight and a hammer. Small comforts against the encroaching dark. Windows secured, doors double-checked. Around 9, the wind stirred. I braced for the familiar rustling. It began softly, then swelled, crescendoing. The porch light flickered, faltered. Listening intently, I discerned a new sound, scraping, dragging, emanating from the field. A heavy pressure built in my chest. Stay calm. Approaching the window, I peered out. Cornstalks bowed and swayed. The Scarecrow's position, deep within the field's heart, was obscure from this angle. I swallowed against a dry throat, my pulse a rapid, steady drum. Then, the thud, identical to the previous nights. Flashlight gripped tight. I eased onto the porch, leaving the door ajar behind me. My boots felt leaden on the aged planks. The beam carved a path into the immediate darkness. Corn rustled invasively on either side, limiting visibility to mere feet. Every muscle coiled, taut. A faint creaking reached me. Rope under tension. Slowly, I swept the beam left, then right. Movement, peripheral, to my left. I snapped the light that way. Only swaying stalks met the beam. Then, deeper in, I glimpsed the scarecrow's post. Stark. Empty. The figure was no longer impaled upon it. Rope fragments dangled, twisting idly. Bits of straw clung to the frayed ends. Ice sluiced through my veins. 20 feet away, perhaps, movement registered again. A shape, crouched low among the rows, indistinct in the gloom, obscured by the dense vegetation. I edged forward, step by hesitant step. The wind howled, a roaring in my ears. My heartbeat hammered at my temples. My foot caught on unseen debris. I stumbled, nearly falling. The flashlight beam danced erratically. When I regained balance, steadied the light, there was nothing. Only corn, whispering secrets to the wind. The rope on the post hung still. The urge to flee screamed within me, but I forced the beam forward, scanning, searching. The shape had vanished. My hands shook violently. "Who's there?" I whispered, the sound cracking. Only the wind replied. Slowly, deliberately, I backed away, light trained unwaveringly on the field. Once clear of the corn's immediate reach, I turned and scrambled into the house, slamming the door, fumbling with the lock. Breath came in ragged gasps, hands slick with sweat, legs trembling. Extinguishing the lights, I stationed myself at a window overlooking the field, concealed behind the curtain's edge, peering into the oppressive dark. The cornfield lay mostly quiescent, stirred only by intermittent gusts. The post stood vacant. Hours crawled by. Occasional movements flickered at the edge of vision. Wind or something else. My lungs felt tight, constricted. Questions swirled, unanswerable. Who or what haunted this place? Sleep offered no sanctuary. I sat vigil in the living room, flashlight clutched like a talisman, ears straining against the house's ancient creaks and groans, each sound a jolt to my overwrought system. Sunrise painted the eastern sky, and I returned to the window. In the gentle morning light, the field appeared deceptively peaceful. With trembling steps, I ventured outside. The central post stood barren. Scraps of fabric littered the earth nearby. The severed rope lay discarded. Straw, scattered like chaff, clung to corn leaves. And there, nestled in the dirt, lay the scarecrow's hat, a fresh tear marring its brim. Bending, I picked it up. A musty odor rose from it. The straw within felt damp. A profound wrongness emanated from the object. No distinct footprints remained, only a general disturbance of the soil, suggesting something dragged away. I remain here, cultivating this land, but my gaze perpetually scans the rows. The scarecrow, or what remained of it, never reappeared. Whether carried off by human hands or propelled by some volition of its own, I cannot say. The noises, the movements, the footprints, they defy easy explanation. I entertain the possibility of trespassers, elaborate pranks, yet no further intrusions have occurred, nothing stolen. The image persists, that low, crouching shape amidst the corn, observing. Nights, I avoid the field entirely. The wind's passage through the stalks no longer soothes. It triggers a visceral pounding in my chest. Sometimes, standing on the porch, I scrutinize the dense green maze, half expecting to see that form emerge. It hasn't, but the tension remains, coiled tight in my gut. I don't know what resides out there, and I have no intention of seeking it in the darkness. Should it return, I will face it. Until then, I live with the memory, the violated rope, the scattered remnants, and the vacant space where a scarecrow once presided over my field. Elias recalled the first instance the rapping began, surfacing from the depths around 1 in the morning. He'd been adrift in bed, poised on the threshold of sleep, after a day that had wrung him dry. No peculiar thoughts troubled his mind that evening. Focus wasn't scattered. He lay simply gazing at the familiar geography of the darkened ceiling. Then came the distinct trio of short raps against the glass, a tapping, insistent, somehow hollow, against his bedroom window. He bolted upright. His gaze shot towards the window, but the heavy drapes remained drawn, a solid curtain against the night. He strained his ears, catching only the profound hush of the late hour. Perhaps some errant noise from the street below, he reasoned. Yet, the logic snagged. His apartment perched on the 3rd floor of a tall structure. No one could possibly be out there, rapping. He attempted a mental shrug, dismissing it as atmospheric whim. Maybe the wind teasing the building, or a disoriented bird. Sleep beckoned, but the sound echoed stubbornly in his mind's quiet corridors. Minutes stretched, the rhythm replaying, before exhaustion finally claimed him, cocooned in the assumption it was a singular anomaly, never to be repeated. The following night, the rapping returned, punctual as a spectral clock chime. This time, Elias was poised, a silent vigil kept while scrolling through his phone in bed. He'd been anticipating it. As the hour hand crept towards 1, the 3 concise taps materialized against the pane. A chill seized him, ice forming where blood should flow. His chest constricted, the frantic pulse hammering a frantic beat against the skin of his neck. With painstaking care, lest he make a sound, he peeled back the edge of the curtain and peered into the urban void. The hulking silhouette of the building opposite loomed, punctuated by a few scattered drowsy lights. Nothing else disturbed the view. The glass itself was immaculate, reflecting only the dim interior. No stray branches clawed at this height, no forgotten pipes hung nearby. A faint breeze stirred the air, yet carried no telltale rustle of feathers or frantic flapping. Only the profound, almost pressurized silence unique to the pre-dawn city answered his scrutiny. After a long minute suspended in observation, he let the curtain fall back, sealing the room in its quietude once more. Sleep arrived eventually, an hour or so later, but it was a troubled, shallow thing, tainted by a lingering disquiet. On the 3rd night, the sequence replicated itself with unnerving precision. Precisely on time, 3 distinct knocks, delicate yet carrying an undeniable firmness, sounded directly upon the glass. Elias's reaction was instantaneous, honed by anticipation. The moment the first tap registered, he sprang from the bed, yanking aside the heavy fabric with a single, sharp motion. He pressed his cheek against the cool, smooth pane, eyes scanning downwards into the shadowed street. Emptiness. He pivoted his gaze, left, then right, scrutinizing the window's frame, the seals, the very structure. No fissures, no blemishes, nothing that might conceivably generate such a percussive sound. He pulled back, standing there in the dimness, clad only in shorts and a t-shirt, his arms rigid, the fine hairs prickling upright. A surge of adrenaline prompted action. He swiftly unlatched the window, flinging the sash upwards, and thrust his head out into the night air. His eyes swept the scene below. Deserted pavement, a scattering of parked vehicles gleaming dully under sparse streetlights, the sidewalk untouched. No movement, animal or human. He tilted his head back, scanning the floors above his own. Nothing but dark windows and sheer brickwork. After a minute, absorbing the metallic chill on his face, the silence pressing in, he retreated, securing the window. Back beside the bed, he felt a clammy dampness bloom under his arms, though the room itself wasn't warm. A peculiar weight settled in his stomach, like having swallowed a cold stone. Sleep, that night, was a fractured, unsettling affair. Daylight brought a gritty resolve. Unease clung to him like a damp shroud, his eyes sore from the lack of true rest. Following a perfunctory breakfast, he descended to the street, embarking on a methodical circuit of the building space. His objective: to identify any plausible physical explanation for the nocturnal disturbance. His bedroom window faced the street, a sheer drop to the pavement below. He traced the vertical line upwards with his eyes. Nothing encroached upon its space. No tenacious tree limbs reached this high. No errant cables or wires dangled nearby. His window wasn't adjacent to any balcony or ledge that might offer purchase. The building's facade was an expanse of unyielding concrete and glass, devoid of loose gutters or decorative fixtures that could rattle or tap. His inspection yielded nothing tangible, no terrestrial culprit. He returned indoors, a coil of frustration tightening within him. That evening, Elias maintained his vigil, wakeful until the appointed hour. As the familiar rapping commenced, his phone was already in hand. Leaping from bed, he swept the curtain aside and stabbed the darkness outside with the phone's flashlight beam. Nothing. The light illuminated only empty air and the distant, sleeping facade across the street. He wrestled the window open again, extending his arm fully, sweeping the beam in wide arcs, up, down, left, right. He saw only the brick face opposite, its windows mostly dark or curtained against the night. Leaning out slightly, peering into the abyss below and the indifferent floors above, he found only stillness. He remained there for several minutes, the phone growing heavy in his grip, the cool night air raising gooseflesh on his exposed skin. Finally, he retracted his arm, shut the window, the latch clicking softly. His heart still hammered against his ribs, a dull ache settling behind his eyes. Sleep, when it came, offered little respite. Over the ensuing days, experimentation became his focus. One night, reasoning that sleep might preempt the event, he surrendered to exhaustion earlier than usual. It made no difference. The summons came precisely at 1, puncturing his dreams. 3 knocks. He jolted awake, flicked on the overhead light, and glared at the window. The rapping ceased instantly. A glance at his phone confirmed the time. 1:02 a.m. The consistency was maddening. The next night, he tried leaving the curtains wide open, determined to witness the act itself. The knocks arrived as scheduled. He was staring directly at the pane when they sounded, 3 dull, resonant taps. Yet he perceived no movement, no fleeting shadow, no anomalous reflection. Just the sound, disembodied and stark. His teeth clenched, a dryness coating his throat. He rose, approached the window, and laid a hand flat against the glass. It felt cold, impassive. He meticulously checked the locks again, ran his fingers along the frame, peered intently at the narrow outer ledge visible from the side. Everything appeared perfectly ordinary, stubbornly normal. A knot of apprehension began tightening in Elias's chest each evening as midnight approached. He'd wait, anticipating the sound, a low-grade anxiety thrumming beneath his skin. He tried drowning out the silence with music through headphones, but inevitably, as 1 o'clock neared, he'd pause the track, pull the cups from his ears, and hold his breath. The knocks would arrive, punctual and unwavering, sending him scrambling to the window once more. On one occasion, immediately after the third tap, he hurled a low, firm question into the silence. "Who's there?" Emptiness answered him. Another night, he tried responding in kind, rapping his own knuckles 3 times against the inner pane. Nothing. He listened intently for receding footsteps on the pavement below, for hushed voices, but the street remained profoundly quiet, save for the occasional distant hum of a passing car. He sought mundane authority, arranging a conversation with the building manager. The man listened from the lobby, arms folded, a mask of polite skepticism on his face. No other tenants had reported disturbances, he stated. He proffered explanations involving the building's internal systems, pipes contracting, the heating system settling. Elias knew, with unshakable certainty, the difference between a metallic clank within the walls and a distinct rap on the glass. This was external, precise. He thanked the manager and departed, feeling the weight of his solitary burden settle more heavily. He briefly considered canvassing his neighbors, but they were mostly anonymous faces, ships passing in the hallways. The building fostered a culture of privacy. No one had mentioned anything remotely unusual. He attempted to capture an objective record, placing his phone on the bedside table, its microphone aimed towards the window. Minutes before 1, he initiated the recording, then lay still, waiting, his breathing shallow, his stomach muscles clenched. The knocks arrived, the familiar faint, distinct triplets. Later, reviewing the audio file, he heard them clearly. It was real. He possessed proof, but proof of what? Merely 3 unexplained sounds in the night. The following day, he subjected the window frame itself to intense scrutiny, examining every inch of its surface, inside and out as best he could. No cracks, no loose fittings. The screws seemed firmly seated, the seals intact. He pressed firmly against the glass. It didn't rattle. He pushed against the frame. It felt solid, unyielding. A few nights later, Elias tried a strategic retreat. He settled in the living room, which faced a different aspect of the city, leaving his bedroom door slightly ajar. Right around 1, the faint but unmistakable cadence echoed down the short hallway. He sprinted towards the source, heart pounding, hoping perhaps to glimpse something, anything, in the instant of its departure. He flicked on the bedroom light and rushed to the window. Nothing but the familiar stillness outside. The silence felt amplified, almost painful. He stood there, catching his breath, a fine tremor running through his hands, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead with the back of his arm. Exhaustion became a constant companion, his circadian rhythm shattered. He experimented with avoidance, staying out late, wandering the quiet streets until 2 or 3 in the morning before returning. But upon entering his apartment, the bedroom always felt subtly wrong, imbued with a lingering sense of presence. He'd find himself drawn to the window, running his fingers along the cool glass near the edges. Once or twice, he thought he detected minuscule marks, faint abrasions almost too small to see, let alone identify. Were they new, or had they always been there, unnoticed? Touching them revealed nothing but smooth, cold glass. He even meticulously cleaned the exterior pane from the inside, leaning out precariously, hoping to dislodge or at least identify anything clinging there. His efforts yielded only a cleaner window and continued silence. One evening, driven by ingenious desperation, he fashioned a crude sentinel. Using small pieces of paper and tape, he carefully affixed them to the outside edge of the window frame, positioned so that any physical contact might disturb them. The act itself was unnerving, leaning out from his third-floor perch, one hand gripping the frame for balance, the other delicately placing the paper strips. His heart hammered against his ribs, acutely aware of the drop below and the sleeping street. He checked beforehand to ensure no one was observing his peculiar preparations. Finally satisfied, he closed the window, drew the curtain, and waited. The knocks arrived as usual. The next morning, he eagerly checked his trap. The paper strips hung precisely as he'd left them, untouched. The tape held firm. No scratches, no tears, no sign of disturbance. Frustration gnawed at him. He considered inviting a friend to stay over, to bear witness, but schedules stubbornly refused to align. One friend worked early shifts. Staying up past 1 was impossible. Another suggested he simply try to ignore it, advice that felt utterly impracticable. The sound was too distinct, too real, its arrival too predictable. Always 3 taps, always around 1. Weeks blurred, and the physical toll became etched on his face. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. A constant jittery tension resided in his limbs. At night, he'd lie rigid in bed, neck stiff, fists clenched, waiting coiled like a spring. He tried wielding a powerful flashlight again, aiming the beam the instant the first knock sounded, raking the airspace below, the facade opposite, the sky above. He half expected to catch the frantic flutter of a trapped bird, the leathery flap of a bat, even a piece of debris swinging inexplicably on an invisible wire. He saw nothing. He scrutinized the building across the way. Could someone be using a laser pointer or tapping from a balcony? But the balconies on that building didn't align with his window. And besides, the windows opposite were invariably dark or curtained. No culprit revealed itself. He pondered the nature of the sound itself. Could it originate from within the glass, some stress fracture invisible to the eye? But it didn't sound like a structural groan or a mechanical tick. It sounded deliberate, like a knuckle or a small smooth stone striking the surface with intent. He tried muffling the world with earplugs one night. Through the dampened silence, he still heard it. Faint, yes, but undeniably present. It jolted him from a shallow doze. Tearing the plugs out, he rushed to the window. Same emptiness. He tried relocating entirely, sleeping on the couch in the living room, with the bedroom door firmly shut. Around 1, he thought he detected a faint echo of the taps through the wall. He rose, crept to the bedroom, opened the door, and stood listening in the darkness. He remained there until past 2, but heard nothing further. The next night, repeating the experiment, he woke abruptly on the couch sometime after 1. Rushing into the bedroom, he was struck by an overwhelming sensation of having just missed something, a feeling of presence hastily withdrawn. The mounting pressure sent him back to the building manager, a final appeal. The man suggested, more firmly this time, that perhaps Elias was imagining it, stress manifesting auditory hallucinations. Elias played the recording again. The manager shrugged, conceding the sound existed, but attributing it to anything. A neighbor tapping on their own window, the sound mysteriously traveling. Elias knew better. The sound originated at his window. He could feel it sometimes, if his hand was resting on the pane. A subtle vibration conducted through the glass. It was faint, but real, confirmation of external contact. The manager vaguely offered to come up one night to listen, an offer never fulfilled, always deferred due to busyness or forgetfulness. Elias finally abandoned that avenue. Help remained elusive. Illumination offered no deterrent. Leaving the lights blazing all night changed nothing. Then came a chilling paradox. He tried leaving the window itself open, just a crack, a few inches to invite the night air. At precisely 1 a.m., the 3 knocks sounded. He froze. If the window was open, how could anything knock on the glass? He leapt up, verified the gap. The window was indeed ajar, yet the knock had sounded identical, resonant, as if striking the solid pane itself. Was it hitting the outer frame near the opening? He reached out into the gap, running his fingers along the smooth, unbroken surfaces. Nothing loose, nothing amiss. He pulled the window shut, feeling a cold stiffness seize his spine, his jaw locked tight. Time continued its relentless passage, and the knocking persisted, an unwavering feature of his nights. Elias became consumed by it. Every night presented a new, futile tactic. He set up his phone on a makeshift tripod, aimed squarely at the window, recording video throughout the crucial hour, ensuring the camera's night mode was active. The following morning, he meticulously reviewed the footage. The audio track clearly captured the familiar 3 taps, but the video remained stubbornly static. Just the window, the dim reflection of his room, the unchanging view beyond. No flicker of movement outside, no shift in light, nothing preceding or following the sudden sound. He advanced the video frame by agonizing frame, squinting at the screen. Nothing. Later he tried again to feel the source, lying awake, hand resting lightly on the window frame, senses straining. When the knocks came, he felt it, the slight, distinct tremor transmitted through the structure. It was unquestionably the window being struck from the outside. No doubt remained in his mind, but the central enigma loomed larger than ever. What unseen, untouched force could possibly reach the exterior of a 3rd-floor window, night after night, at the exact same time, leave no physical trace, and vanish instantaneously? He began to dread the approach of 1 in the morning. The hour before became a crucible of anxiety. Tension coiled in his muscles, sweat beaded under his arms, his heart rate climbed. Sometimes, the stress stole his appetite for dinner. The sheer weight of the unknown, the inability to comprehend, made him feel physically ill. Headaches became frequent. He took to pacing his small apartment, peering out the living room window, checking the peephole in the front door, listening intently at the door for any unusual sounds in the hallway. Nothing ever seemed out of place beyond his bedroom. All strangeness remained confined to that single pane of glass at that single recurring moment. No solution ever materialized. The phenomenon simply continued, night after night, the same 3 knocks echoing in the quiet room. He never saw anything. He never caught anyone or anything in the act. The building manager offered no further assistance. His neighbors remained silent, apparently undisturbed. Logic offered no foothold, no rational explanation. Eventually, Elias stopped trying to explain it. He ceased the frantic quest for answers and began, slowly, reluctantly, to learn to live with it. He would wake around 1, hear the familiar rapping, perhaps cast a cursory glance towards the curtained window, find only the expected absence of anything unusual, and then settle back down, waiting for sleep to reclaim him. After several months, the sound still provoked a flicker of nervousness, a residual tension, but the raw fear had subsided, replaced by a weary tolerance. It became, bizarrely, part of his routine, an unwelcome but accepted fixture in his nights. Even now, the rapping recurs, though perhaps with less frequency, or perhaps he simply notices it less acutely. He has tried rearranging his bedroom, moving the bed to the opposite wall. He invested in heavier, sound-dampening curtains. He experimented with playing white noise or music throughout the night. None of these measures stops the knocks. They still arrive, punctual as ever when they choose to manifest. He has learned not to shout into the darkness, not to leap out of bed in a panic, not to waste energy meticulously examining the window frame yet again. He simply listens now, acknowledging the sound with a kind of detached awareness, reminding himself that it is beyond his control or comprehension, and waits for it to pass. He no longer expects an answer. He no longer strives to solve the puzzle. He deals with it, but he remembers those initial weeks vividly, the coiled tension, the desperate energy poured into finding a cause, the visceral fear born purely of the unknown, the cold sweat prickling his neck, the knot tightening in his stomach, the perpetually tired eyes staring into the darkness. The knocks themselves cause no harm. They never shattered the glass, never breached the boundary of his home. They just happened, as if something unseen, dwelling in the spaces just outside understanding, had decided to periodically remind him that the world held mysteries far exceeding his grasp. It still bothers him, that persistent enigma, but the edge has dulled. He lives alongside the strange. That is all he can say. The first tremor of wrongness in Unit 247 registered 3 weeks after the ink dried on the lease. It announced itself subtly, a carton brimming with ghosts of Christmases past, tinsel, glass baubles, tangled lights, had shifted perhaps 5 centimeters to the left. An insignificant migration, unless you're Elias Thorne, a man whose phone documented the precise cartography of his stored life. 3 times he consulted the digital image, the timestamp immutable. Someone, or something, had absolutely disturbed that box. He stood there, key cold against his palm, beneath the flickering fluorescence of Sentinel storage solutions. The air, thick with the scent of pulverized concrete, and decaying cardboard felt stagnant. Unit 247 resided at the terminus of a long corridor, a monotonous procession of faded tangerine doors secreted away in a shadowy alcove conveniently beyond the indifferent gaze of the security cameras. A fact Mr. Henderson, the facility manager, had disclosed with practiced nonchalance. A justification for the modest discount when Elias signed away his monthly $89.99. Clara, his wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, had deemed the entire venture an exercise in folly. "Liquidate it, Elias," she'd urged, her voice clipped with exasperated practicality. A clean slate, but 12 years couldn't simply be incinerated. Thus, this 10 by 10 concrete cell became the repository for fractured memories, photo albums heavy with obsolete smiles, the worn leather armchair inherited from his grandfather, plastic sarcophagi packed with seasonal attire. He wrestled the corrugated metal door upward, its shriek echoing down the empty hall. Inside, initial inspection revealed familiar territory: the bulwark of moving boxes against the far wall, the stoic armchair, the stacked bins. Then, confirmation: the Christmas carton, undeniably nudged from its designated coordinates. And more, the fine patina of dust across the box tops showed faint trails, spectral fingerprints disrupting the gray stillness. His phone emerged again, its screen casting a cool glow. New pictures materialized, juxtaposed against the archival shots from 3 weeks prior. A clammy dampness bloomed on his palms. He wasn't fabricating this. The geography of his past had been altered. Sentinel boasted keypad entry, surveillance at the perimeter gate, another checkpoint into the building itself. Codes were essential. Yet, within the warren of corridors, anonymity reigned. Elias had observed fellow renters, transient figures swallowed by the rows of doors. A simple mistake, perhaps. Wrong unit number, a jiggled lock. He scrutinized his own padlock. Pristine, inviolate. A methodical inventory ensued. Nothing pilfered, merely rearranged. The dust patterns whispered of intrusion. The very air felt recycled, recently inhaled by unfamiliar lungs. Logic dictated a call to the authorities, or at minimum, a report filed with Henderson, but the words felt absurd, flimsy. "Excuse me, sir. My holiday decorations have migrated 5 centimeters. They diagnose post-divorce, post-job loss delirium. Perhaps Clara's assessment wasn't entirely unfounded." So, Elias embraced a different kind of logic. A trip to Circuit City yielded a motion-activated camera, compact and discreet. He nestled it behind a stack of books, its electronic eye aimed squarely at the door, its battery promising a fortnight of vigilance. If phantoms trespassed, they would be captured. A week unfurled in silence. Daily, Elias scrutinized the camera's digital harvest. Stillness reigned. The boxes remained steadfast, immutable. Dust accumulated in serene, unbroken layers. The unsettling conviction began to fray, replaced by the nagging suspicion he'd conjured the disturbance from his own internal chaos. Then, during his ritualistic weekly visit, a necessary exchange of seasonal garments, he found it. Lodged tightly between 2 cartons labeled kitchenware, fragile, items untouched since the move, lay a journal. Utterly plain, black-covered, the sort procured from any drugstore aisle. No inscription marred its cover. Elias had never laid eyes on it before. His fingers trembled as he coaxed it open. The inaugural entry bore a date from 14 months prior, March 15th, 2023. Something is wrong with Unit 247. The boxes were stacked against the back wall. I know they were. Today, they're a meter closer to the door. Management insists no one else has access. Lock's fine. Am I losing my mind? The notebook nearly slipped from his grasp. 14 months ago, another soul had leased this precise concrete box. Another soul had perceived the same subtle shifts, the same unsettling anomalies. Elias sank into his grandfather's armchair, the worn leather sighing beneath his weight, and read on. March 22nd, 2023. More displacement. The plastic bins migrated from right to left. Set up a camera. Footage is blank. It's like the movement occurs between the frames. The air in here feels occupied, heavy, as if someone waits for me to leave before they stir. April 3rd, 2023. Footprints in the dust, small. A woman's, a child's, leading from the door, ending abruptly at the concrete wall. Vanished into solid matter. Took photos, but later, nothing, just smooth dust. April 15th, 2023. Whispers now, barely audible, not words, more the echo of speech, a lingering resonance. Asked Henderson if anyone expired in these units. He denied it, but his gaze skittered away. April 30th, 2023. Felt something touch my neck today, reaching for a high shelf. Cold fingertips, spun around, empty, door shut tight. I'm clearing out tomorrow. This isn't worth $89.99. May 1st, 2023. Tried to move out, couldn't. The boxes, they refused to cross the threshold. Inside, they're manageable, but at the doorway, they gain impossible weight, like they're filled with wet cement. Even empty ones feel anchored. What is happening? May 2nd, 2023. The whispers are coalescing, forming my name. Almost decipherable sentences now, about staying, never leaving. Writing this inside 247, can't seem to exit. My limbs are leaden, the air is crushing. This must be the final entry. If found, avoid Unit 247. Don't. The script terminated mid-word. Blank pages followed. Later inquiries with Henderson yielded predictable results. No official record of a previous tenant for Unit 247. Empty for over a year, he'd insisted. Elias should have fled then, purged the unit, bolted the door on that concrete enigma forever. He did not. Call it morbid fascination. Call it an inexplicable magnetism emanating from the space itself. His visits grew frequent, morphing from weekly obligations to near-daily rituals. More cameras appeared, superior models boasting infrared and refined motion sensors. He meticulously charted the position of every object, compiling a photographic atlas of his stored existence, measuring distances with obsessive precision. Unit 247 held a secret, and he felt compelled to unearth it. The phenomena escalated, graduating from subtle nudges, a carton infinitesimally repositioned, a garment inexplicably shed from its hanger, dust whirls defying logic, to overt manipulations. One afternoon, Every box stood rotated precisely 90 degrees counterclockwise. The following week, the entire contents had undergone a bizarre transposition, mirroring the original layout in reverse. The cameras offered only electronic snow, punctuated by fleeting bursts of interference. Then came the susurrations. 3 days ago, faint murmurs surfaced at the periphery of his hearing, like conversations muffled by thick walls. Turning towards the source silenced them instantly. Yesterday, the footprints manifested, small, distinct impressions in the dust, tracing the path from door to back wall before dissolving into nothingness. He photographed them, frantic documentation against the encroaching strangeness. Viewing the images later revealed only undisturbed dust, precisely as the journal foretold. Today finds him seated again in his grandfather's chair, chronicling these events. The atmosphere has thickened, acquiring a viscous quality, like breathing underwater. The whispers intensify, shedding their ambiguity. Words now surface, recognizable fragments concerning permanence, about release from worldly burdens. His legs feel impossibly heavy. An attempt to rise moments ago proved futile. His muscles remained stubbornly inert. Unit 247's door gapes open, yet the aperture seems distorted, viewed through shimmering heat or flawed glass. Clarity arrives with the whispers. They speak his name now, Elias. They murmur assurances of sanctuary, of an end to divorce decrees and fruitless job searches, an end to solitude. He can remain here, cradled within 247's concrete embrace, eternally. His hand trembles, the pen gaining unnatural gravity with every syllable committed to paper. The air presses inward, dense and unyielding. Lifting his arms requires Herculean effort. Should this notebook fall into other hands, heed its warning. Avoid Unit 247. Do not unlock its secrets. Do not. 3 days hence, Mr. Henderson discovered the storage unit vacant of its tenant, though not its contents. Rent paid through month's end, yet Elias Thorne had vanished, abandoning furniture, boxes, photographs, his entire archived past. Curiously, every item had been shoved flush against the perimeter walls, clearing a distinct space in the unit's center, as if marking where someone had recently been sitting. The abandoned artifacts were duly cleared, and Unit 247 re-entered the rental market. The new rate, $79.99 per month. A genuine steal, Henderson might assure a prospective client. Ideal for someone navigating transitions, needing a place for keepsakes. The cameras, after all, functioned perfectly. The keypad system remained state-of-the-art. What conceivable harm could there be? Unit 247 awaits. Its atmosphere is redolent of concrete dust and the faint, papery ghost of time. Stand very still inside. Hold your breath, and you might just detect a faint murmur. The ventilation, surely. Nothing more. Henderson offers attractive terms for immediate occupancy. Pay no mind to the dust, or the occasional footprint that appears from nowhere, or the peculiar tendency of boxes to rearrange themselves in your absence. $79.99. An absolute bargain for a 10 by 10 parcel of forever. Just disregard any unfamiliar black notebooks you might stumble upon, and under no circumstances should you begin writing within their pages. The whispers are growing louder. They recognize you. They've anticipated your arrival. Unit 247 is prepared for its next resident. Are you prepared for for Unit 247.